Righty-o. Florida Governor DeSantis, big tech censorship doing damage to society.
Let me bring in Florida Governor Ron DeSantis now, get some reaction to what we just heard. Governor, thanks very much for being here and standing by throughout our live coverage of the G7 closeout meeting. Your reaction to what you heard from the president.
Well, Maria, I think it's quite a contrast from his predecessor. I think that President Biden is someone that's much more passive on the world stage, not nearly as assertive as somebody like Donald Trump was. I think his energy level is obviously much lower.
They're just systematically focusing on all of that. Like literally, how can one be like more biased? It's not possible. Like literally, this is the definition of bias.
So I think that's just something that people are sizing up. I think that our adversaries are watching that. I didn't hear very much in the way of holding China accountable for their role in covering up the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic. I think that's absolutely essential that China be held accountable for their role in that, as well as any bureaucrats in the United States who may have been covering up. But, you know, they were talking economically a lot about other countries. He was talking about reducing energy production worldwide. And I couldn't help but think, you know, here in the United States, you know, he's leaving a lot of people behind. Look at all the workers he left behind by canceling the Keystone XL pipeline. Those were thousands.
And Green New Deal, motherfucker.
And thousands of
You
very good
piece of
jobs.
shit.
And then also think.
And yeah, and you want to just flood New Orleans, you want to flood Houston, you want to flood Miami, you want to flood Tampa, you want to flood DC, you want to flood New York. You like, what is your problem, you
about
moron?
Family budgets with the sharp increase in gas prices and then the overall budding inflation that we're seeing that's being fueled by his big spending policy. So I think that his performance probably played well with European elites. Not sure that.
Oh, elites, right? Of course, because you aren't elites, right? You are for the people, like for the people who love a few rich people getting all the money. Somehow, populist means loving a system that enables a few rich people to become even more rich at the expense of everyone else. That is what you consider populist.
There was much in it for middle America.
Oh, and because there is much in it for middle America from Republicans. You motherfucker, okay? You motherfucker. You are an absolute demon, satanic creature from the abyss that needs to be destroyed and banished forever from this universe.
Yeah, we will hear more about his plans for taxes. He wants to have a global minimum tax of 15%.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that is very, very good. Very, very good. I want a global tax of 50%, not 15. But of course, he's probably thinking corporate. I want, he's obviously would be thinking more like maybe corporate. I don't know. I have to look into this.
In some economies, that would actually be a tax increase if you look at a place like Ireland. So we'll get more on that. But
yeah, that would. So what are you endorsed? Yeah, it would be a tax increase.
One study struck me before I was coming on the air.
I'm very glad they're doing this. 15% global minimum tax. Very glad.
And this was about Florida. And it says the average taxpayer who moved to Florida from the other 49 states had an average income. This is an average gross income of $110,000, which is about twice the average household income. Of course, you don't have income tax in Florida, and it's actually helped your economy. Tell us.
It's helped your economy, but maybe at the expense of like all the other economies that you're creating capital flight for. Like you moron. And then you've got no tax. How do you have any state revenue? You can't. Obviously, you have some tax. What is it? It's going to be like value added tax. So it's just like a flat tax on on sales tax. Like, what does it change? It comes to the same, except that rich people proportionally pay less.
Assess the economy right now in Florida
and
tell us what you've seen over the last year in terms of an increase in population.
Well, sure, Maria. I mean, before COVID, we had seen by far the highest amount of wealth move into Florida compared to any other state. But I think
that's called capital flight.
Accelerated.
That's called capital flight. That's not a good thing.
COVID,
you
I think
moron.
you're seeing a lot of people move here. Obviously, we have a very favorable tax climate. Florida's the low.
Please stop presenting it as good. Stop saying favorable for when you've got low taxes. It's not favorable.
lowest per capita tax burden, individual tax burden in the country. And we're very proud of that. That has led, obviously, to more businesses moving here. So we've got a lot of great things.
Yeah, but it's good in the context of like capital flight. It isn't good like at a global scale. It's good for
I think
you with businesses coming in. On the other hand, it's not good for you because at the same time, you don't have proper government revenue.
on the horizon, but it's a lesson in how you do this. You tax people, you attack business, you do all those things in a country
In any case, yeah, I'm anti-corporate tax. I'd have 0% corporate
like
tax.
ours. It's very mobile. People vote with their feet. And so what we've been able to do is with low taxes and a favorable environment, we end up taking in more revenue than we probably would if we had higher taxes because
Again, you're doing so by benefiting from the system of capital flight. You
of the
wouldn't otherwise.
underlying dynamism of the economy.
You
Yeah, it's
moron.
incredible. You've been doing
It's
so
incredible.
much, Governor. I want to get
It's
into some of
incredible. He's been doing so much shit. It's
your
incredible, you
moves. And
moron.
let me start with the bill that you just signed to stop the censorship of Floridians. Last week on this program,
You
we
moron.
went through the Fauci Facebook files where it's clear, based on emails between Mark Zuckerberg and Dr.
Yeah, I got censored on YouTube for saying that there's it's the lab leak hypothesis is most likely true based on circumstantial evidence.
Anthony Fauci. They were
Like
coordinating
my video actually got removed. I made a video on this.
in terms of what should be reported on Facebook and what shouldn't be. Facebook took down many posts about the origins of COVID-19, only to have egg on its face when they had to change the policy again. Do you believe Fauci colluded with Mark Zuckerberg? Does this expose Facebook to legal action, which, of course, is what Senator Ted Cruz told us last week?
Well, you pointed out something important, Maria. What they censored was actually true. They called it a conspiracy theory if you said this may have leaked from the lab. They were also censoring around the same time last year any criticisms of lockdowns. And we know now lockdowns didn't work. States like Florida that were open were better off for it. And so you often hear people say, hey, these are private companies. They can do what they want, yada, yada, yada. But here's an example.
Yada, yada. But this is coming from the person from a Republican, right, whose whole ideology is companies should be free to do whatever the hell they want. So why are you suddenly being completely inconsistent?
Working with Fauci, we're
Okay, so you're being inconsistent. You're being inconsistent. Like, okay, and you're saying that what
Facebook,
Fauci?
you could argue, is essentially acting as an arm of the state because
Okay, well, then do you accept that we maybe regulate companies when they're not acting like they should?
they're suppressing what the government once suppressed. And so I think this issue with big tech is unlike anything we've seen. They have
Oh, so suddenly you want government intervention in tech when tech doesn't actually represent and benefit the interests of the population. Wow, you're suddenly understanding something that all kids would understand. Like, you're literally finally starting to make sense, but only because it fits your stupid biases.
massive
Wow.
amounts of power. These
Wow.
are monopolies that are much
Wow.
stronger
Wow, Mr. Republican is worried about monopolies, motherfucker.
than the monopolies of the early 20th century. They control, in effect, a handful of companies, a huge percentage of the political speech in this country. And so I think when you have situations, they're not just censoring based on partisanship. Obviously, we've seen conservatives be censored. But when they're censoring things about some of the most important issues that we've ever addressed, how COVID started, whether
Yeah, I agree it's a problem, but again, maybe don't be a Republican.
lockdowns work,
Yeah.
they're
You
really
moron.
doing damage
You
to society.
moron. You absolute...
Yeah, they've
I
suddenly
was going to say the N-word because I decided,
believed
again, I decided I would say the N-word to refer to morons of the Republican kind in the logic of reclaiming the word to use it, for a good cause. So, yeah, what I call stylistic fascism. But, yeah.
come to believe that they are the arbiters of truth, and many of the things that they're censoring are in fact true. As you say, is Florida considering legal actions against Facebook?
Well, I know that the state's already involved in some of the multi-state litigation that predated those revelations. I mean, obviously, I would support any ways that we can vindicate the rights of individual Floridians to be able to converse about public issues. Now, our bill is the first of its kind. It really tracks what Justice Clarence Thomas laid out in one of his concurrences a few months ago, where these companies really are more akin to common carriers. And so they should be treated as such. You know, in our view is yes,
so okay,
you can have certain
you want government intervention now,
you do
right?
it,
You
but
want
you gotta
government
apply
intervention
it evenly. And if you don't, you're advertising as an open platform. You're saying you're not publishers, but then you're acting as publishers by stifling speech you don't like. That's a fraud on the consumer, and people deserve to be able to vindicate their rights in court.
Okay, that's a fair point.
I mean, this censorship feels like communist China. You know, you've talked about
Always
big
bringing
tech
up communism
and its
as
relationship to
as
the
if like ultra
Chinese
right wing parties didn't have like censorship too, right? It's of course it's always this left wing thing that's censoring, right? Completely forget about Franco and Mussolini and Hitler.
Communist Party. You've been researching this. You say that the lockdown approach that was led by the Democrats was promoted by the CCP. Tell me about that.
Sure. Before I do, just point out, when we signed the big tech bill, I had folks who had fled communist Cuba speaking about how important it was. I had people that fled socialist Venezuela talking about how important it was to combat censorship, because they lived through really bad periods of censorship.
And I absolutely agree that that's a problem, but you're using it for completely dishonest
purposes. Look at how big tech has
purposes.
handled the CCP. They are very deferential to the Communist Party of China.
Yeah, and I agree, because they're completely weak, and they'll just do anything that benefits their business, basically.
And I think that China was very much invested in...
The point is that big tech deserves to be criticized, but not by you, because you are like literally even worse.
Promoting lockdowns as we started getting in to 2020, February, March. Obviously, those Italy lockdowns were very much patterned off what we saw in Wuhan. And Facebook and some of these big companies, they were really serving to elevate the lockdown hysteria and to absolutely suppress people who were raising questions and concerns about lockdowns. And the reason why that's I think, so galling is because up until COVID, public health guidance was never in a pandemic to just lock down indefinitely. This was kind of a new invention that was really fueled by the Chinese experience. And so I think the relationship between big tech and the CCP is very problematic. And quite frankly, a lot of these big corporations, particularly in entertainment and some of these other fields of the American economy.
And I wonder if it starts with academia, Governor. You know, you heard President Biden
Of course,
say that
it's
he wants
always,
more
the peril, academia peril, Jewish intellectuals controlling academia, intellectual elites that promote postmodern neo-Marxism to destroy Western civilization.
From China, but we really haven't seen a tough stance in terms of U.S. policy on China. In fact, just this week,
again calling for Nazi policies against other countries.
President Biden revoked President Trump's ban.
Again, the stupid tough stance, and of course we know what that means, right? Is that you're acting like a Nazi, and you want like the USA to be able to beat all other countries and to have complete reign over them. And you're not happy that China is now sort of getting more economically powerful, as it's growing as it should, because it is more populous.
And on WeChat, I know that you have talked about the CCP infiltrating Florida universities. You've got Confucius centers. This is a very important point, and I want you to talk about what you're doing, these two bills that you just signed in terms of stopping the influence, foreign influence in universities, because the CCP has been able to get inside of important institutions in this country and steal data. We know that Secretary Pompeo has said they are now inside the gates. There was a string of indictments in 2020.
Again, just stop being a Nazi, and that's not a problem. Get rid of countries, just get rid of authoritarian governments, and no longer worry about
Pompeo, State Department, everyone from the head of the biology department at Harvard to an NYPD officer to shutting down the embassy in Houston. They do get inside of our institutions. What can you do to stop it? And tell me about those Confucius centers in Florida.
So we did two bills, one to combat foreign influence, specifically targeted at the CCP, as well as corporate espionage, which also is generally targeted at the CCP because they're the worst offenders. So we actually had a Confucius Institute that was done at Miami-Dade College. Fortunately, when I became governor, we looked at that and we had the college get rid of it. However, this is something I think that's going to be a continued concern. So our bill we signed basically bans things like Confucius Institutes from getting a foothold on Florida universities. I think that's really important. But as you document, it seems like every other week there'll be some academic researcher who's identified as having ties with the CCP. People get indicted. People flee America once they're found out about this.
That's
and so
quite possible.
we're really trying to scrutinize what's going on in these universities inside Florida. We also want to protect trade secrets from our businesses and all that, because CCP infiltration there has been very, very prominent throughout the country. But man, the academia, there's deep ties in many segments.
But yeah, let's fight the CCP. The CCP is horrible, but you're fighting it from your own Nazi perspective.
Of academia with the Communist Party of China.
I want you to hear President Biden talk about Xi Jinping recently. I was astounded at these comments. And again, we still do not have a clear understanding of what Biden's policy is on China. Here he is just a few weeks ago. Watch this, Governor.
I've spent more time with President Xi of China than any world leader has. For 24 hours of private meetings with him. Just interpreter, 17,000 miles traveling with him in China and here. He firmly believes that China, before the year 3035, is going to own America.
3035. 3035.
Because autocracies can make quick decisions. But America is unique. Of all nations in the world, we're the only nation organized based on an idea.
Yeah, Sieg Heil. Sieg Heil.
So that's it, Governor. The Xi Jinping, the president of China, thinks he's going to own America within 15 years. That's what you just heard from President Biden.
Yeah, but he said that, and he says he's not going to stand up. Like, he says he's going to stand up to it. Precisely, he's being a Nazi about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really astounding. But I tell you, this origins of COVID, this is such an astounding cover-up. One of the biggest cover-ups we've ever seen, and probably in the history of our country that we've dealt with in terms of what they did.
Yeah, I agree that there's a cover-up, but you're an idiot because you're still a Nazi.
With the gain-of-function research, understanding that these researchers had been infected in the fall of 2019, and then to cover it up for months, and then to not view that as something that's of utmost importance, to be able to, one, get the truth, but then to hold China accountable. They caused immense damage throughout the world by allowing this virus to be unleashed on the rest of the world. And so to be that deferential to China, I don't think that's what the American public is looking for. I think that they want to see a policy from the United States that's more assertive against China, that understands China as a threat. They're an economic competitor, but they're also a threat in terms of what they're trying to achieve.
But again, the threat is having separate countries. It's not specifically China against the U.S. See, that is why you're completely misinterpreting the whole issue.
Governor, real quick before we go, set the record straight on the cruise industry. I know that there is a narrative being pushed by the media right now that you're in a war with the cruise industry over whether or not to require vaccine passports. Where are you with the cruise industry, and what should Americans expect?
Well, we're in a fight with the CDC, who's mothballed the industry for over a year. We don't believe they have the authority to do that. We're suing them in federal court. We just had a hearing last week. Very positive response, we thought, from the court. We think we'll get a favorable ruling there. We definitely think we would win on appeal as well. And so once we're past the CDC's intransigence, then they're going to be free to sail in Florida. They, of course, are going to have to follow Florida law, but, you know, they're going to be able to...
Okay, well, we got that. I don't really have all that much opinion on that because, like, there's arguments for it and against that particular issue.